Alright, so you guys are gonna have to bear with me here. I like to think I know a lot about the fire and grass starters. Aha! You what? You wanna tell me why you put Meganium as stronger than Sceptile and Decidueye? Yeah, I've had bad takes in my time, but that one was probably the stupidest one that I've ever done. My writer and I were sitting down. I knew deep down I myself was right. Meganium is the worst one. But after like some debate, we both kind of agreed on it and we both thought that Meganium was better. No. My initial thought was right. Meganium's worse. We should have just went with my initial thought, and you guys in the comment section that were clowning me for the Meganium, yeah, you were right. I screwed up. So in the next ranking the starters video, like where we rank all of them, yeah, there'll definitely be a big difference. So sorry. Because those ones are the ones I'm the most comfortable using and know the most about. So ranking the water ones is gonna be a bit harder for me because I don't slap these guys on teams as often as I do the other ones. With that said, I'm gonna go by the usual format I normally do when it comes to ranking the starters, where if they have a cool exclusive gimmick like a Mega, a Z-move, and a G-Max, it will come up. With that said, let's round up this trilogy before I have to do a ranking let's go starters from weakest to strongest, where it's just my actual face staring at the mascots for 1 minute before I make a conclusion and pause the video abruptly. For those interested in that idea, if the video gets 1,000 likes, I'll do it. Now let's get started. Just kidding. Miss Magius, Hardcore Randomizer Nuzlocke, link in the description below. Now let's start. Yeah, there's no beating around the bush here. Regular Samurott may as well not even exist anymore. Its stats are weirdly placed, with it being slow and with a rather mediocre set of attacking stats. Despite being introduced in Gen 5, where power creep runs rampant, it has less special attack than a Gen 1 starter. And like the Charizard before it, it has no way to boost its special attack and has been using Sword Stance instead. It doesn't have the proficient, if not excellent bulk that stuff like Alola has, nor does it have the sheer offensive wall-breaking power that Keldeo has. Yeah, I could go into its moves like Aqua Jet, Hydro Pump, Sacred Sword, and all of that, but the issue there is that there's not much of a point, because most of what I can talk about is just done better by other Pokemon. It's sad. You hate to see it. But hey, spoiler alert, things do get better eventually. You'd think having a G-Max form would make me think that Inteleon is higher up. Surely its stat spread that is actually kind of solid for a speedy special attacker would have done the trick. But like, I'm having trouble really like justifying trying to put it higher. G-Max Hydro Snipe is just a big stupid move that hits really hard. Sure, like this guy's got that glass cannon energy. I think the issue at hand is that while having that energy never works for pure water types. Pure water types tend to be more on the bulky side, since water only hits like 3 things for super effective damage, so its stab isn't that good offensively. In terms of coverage, it's okay, I guess. Ice Beam, Air Slash, and Shadow Ball are fine, I suppose. It's just that other than Ice Beam, I don't think these moves really help with much. They're nice, but Ice Beam is the only really good move here, unless you just really hate Buzzwole or something. In which case, go ahead and use Air Slash. Sniper makes you crit dependent for the actual real damage. But you gotta set up Focus Energy first along with the Scope Lens item and your Snipe Shot to get guaranteed damage. And that means even with base 125 special attack, your only super powerful damaging move is your Stab. And it's not like, let's say, Dracovish, where that's fine and dandy. Sadly, Inteleon is kinda easy to wall at times. And that, combined with its fragility, makes it sadly a little on the worse side. I rate Primarina slightly higher than Inteleon, which I will admit, it's debatable. But Primarina, unlike Inteleon, can A, take a hit, and B, is bulky as a water type. The lack of reliable recovery, because Draining Kiss is a question and not an answer, definitely holds it back from being higher on this list. But where it doesn't have Inteleon's high highs of big special attack damage from either Hydro Snipe or a crit snipe shot, Primarina also doesn't have the low lows of dying to a slap in the face. It's got better coverage, doesn't need the setup, is less predictable with the item slot because it can be its Z Crystal, Scarf, Specs, Assault Vest, Leftovers, or whatever else you decide to give it to fulfill some strange weird idea you got somewhere in the brain. Energy Ball, Moonblast, and Scald are all really good options to run, and if it ever wanted to, it could actually boost up with Calm Mind, which can be kind of terrifying. One could argue that it's slow, and it has more weaknesses technically, and that due to G-Max being better than Z-moves and Oceanic Operetta being less useful than the 3 turns of Hydro Snipe, Inteleon could take this spot and not Primarina, and that's fair. However, I think Primarina makes it because it has a lot more going for it in its kit and is less predictable overall than Sniper Geico. Also, immunity to the dragons is nice. This is one of those situations where Feraligatr being this high can be attributed to the fact that it's just good enough to work. It's got the perfect amount of bulk, attack, and speed to actually be a really solid Pokemon. It's still definitely in the bottom half, but there's an argument to be made that it's not worth the team slot. Sheer Force is a free Life Orb, which you can stack a Life Orb on top for extra sauce. Nidoking has shown how well this works, but Feraligatr has the advantage of getting to use Dragon Dance, and that one turn of setup may be all it needs to slap you silly with Liquidation, Ice Punch, and Rock Slide. Its main issue is that if you want to hit something like Tentacruel or Toxapex for good super effective damage, you have to use Earthquake, which has no effect and thus you take damage. But that's just a small price to pay for Salvation. Its only real flaw is that it was made in a generation where everything, including itself, was weaker, and so it has a hard time keeping up with some of the more powerful Pokemon, and sadly, has a little too comfortable of a spot under the shadow of Gyarados. Okay, so before anyone asks, because Shell Smash Mega Blastoise was never in any official format, it would feel wrong to rate this thing higher than here because its strongest set technically isn't real. If it was, it would be number 1 on this list without saying. Bottom line, it's broken. I had to get that out of the way after sitting down and asking myself for an hour straight how I'd rule this. Now, what about the G-Max form? I don't remember it doing that much in VGC doubles, so I can't really say for sure. Albeit, it is incredibly powerful, and I'm glad it wasn't allowed in singles play. Now, as for regular Blastoise, it either uses its bulk to take a hit and Shell Smash, and then spams Hydro Pumps, Ice Beams, and Aura Spears, or it takes the other approach of making use of tools like Scald, Body Press, Rapid Spin, and Iron Defense alongside the leftovers. What prevents it from being higher on this list? Its stats are sadly very middling, and it doesn't truly excel at anything, which is unfortunate. But despite being on the lower half, I think it's still very solid. Well, what about Mega Blastoise back in Gen 6 and 7? Sadly, it was unimpressive. 1, it had lower special attack than the better Megas. 2, it didn't make too much use of Mega Launcher. And 3, its bulk wasn't as good as it looked thanks to no way to regain any HP. Feels bad, man. Quaquaval has the boons of being really powerful, and a solid rapid spinner. Aqua Step for boosting speed, Moxie for boosting attack, Brave Bird in close combat for hard-hitting damage, and Bulk Up and Roost to put the fear of God into your opponent in the form of a funny dancing duck that looks like it'll beat the crap out of you if you insult its hair. Don't get me wrong, it's definitely not the easiest to position properly and get in on the field, given that water and fighting is a rather weak weakness-prone type combination. But on the other side of the coin, it feels pretty high risk and high reward. You're putting in a decent bit in the trying to make sure you get it on the field to get that Moxie Sweep with Aqua Step and your other buttons of choice. If you mess up, your opponent gets momentum, and suddenly, you're potentially getting swept. If you succeed, you're very probably sweeping your opponent. Although the main issue is that looking at it doesn't make me want to play Pokemon. It makes me want to go watch JoJo. Empoleon is one of those Pokemon that I can't even say would have been lower if it didn't get Roost. It's been pretty consistently UU throughout its career the last I checked, albeit a little underrated. Roost just kind of made it even better, to the point where it was chilling in OU for at least a little bit, before sadly dropping to UU again recently, where it will likely stay for the remainder of the generation thanks to access to Stealth Rock, Roost, Flip Turn, and access to stuff like Ice Beam, Surf, and Knockoff, depending on what you want to do with that final move slot. Water and Steel is an excellent typing, and luckily, thank goodness, the Salt Cure chip does not stack. I genuinely was ready to watch Empoleon die in 2 turns, because Garg got off the Salt Cure, and I was ready to watch the man plummet. But hey, for what it's worth, that is not what happened. UU is a good home for it, where it'll hang out again with its old pal Infernape, and hopefully Torterra can rise back up so they can finally be a trio together. Empoleon's kit is simple, but effective for utility. But hey, if you do want to play offense, Agility, Pitaya Berry, and either Torrent or Competitive both work. Blast through stuff with Hydro Pump. So, I get the talk about the Mega without feeling like something is off, because Mega Swampert's playstyle has remained roughly the same, with no sort of massive shift thanks to its non-Mega getting a move that has goober buffed its Mega. Okay, except for Flip Turn. So, I just won't talk about it to uphold my principles. Now, admittedly, regular Swampert itself isn't too interesting. It can play a Curse set, a Toxic Stall set, or some sort of Hazard Flip Turn set. It can make use of Scald as well to solid effect, especially with its incredibly elite type combination. Despite attack being its highest stat, regular Swampert has always functioned more defensively and with utility in mind. Leftovers is its best friend. Mega Swampert, however, is when I can stand behind a cause. Rather than playing defensively, it eats its canned spinach and then proceeds to grow some of the greatest arms in Pokemon history. It's out here fitting in with JoJo's and Baki characters with just how much meat is on those arms. It looks like it ate a bunch of nails for breakfast this morning without any milk. 150 attack and 110 in both defenses is nothing to scoff at, especially with one weakness. One that can be ice punched through in a moment's notice. And the base 70 speed may not look impressive at first, but on a rainy day, or if a local Pelipper happens to be nearby, Swampert goes from just standing there and staring you down waiting for you to make a move, to speed blitzing whatever Pokemon you have out before you can give a command. Waterfall, Earthquake, and Ice Punch are the bread and butter moves, with the 4th slot being pretty expendable, between stuff like Rock Slide and Superpower. I like to run Power Up Punch in the last slot in order to make Mega Swampert even tougher to deal with, because now it's even more jacked. It is the definitive Rain Sweeper, and Barrascuda and Basque Legion can only wish they had the sheer raw might that this buffed out, Popeye looking Mudfish has. Maybe if they go to the gym, they might be able to compete. I've had a lot to say about the water starters, for better and for worse. But I'm not gonna pretend that I have much to say about this one because it's pretty obvious. Slightly lower defenses in exchange for some speed, and they swap the special attack and attack while also giving this bad boy sharpness to give it even more physical power. But even with all this stuff, base 85 speed, 108 attack, and a new ability to make Razor Shell actually do damage would normally make it neat at best. But then, Cecil's Edge completely changed everything by introducing a near base 100 power move thanks to sharpness. and it has a secondary effect to set up a layer of spikes. You can just spam this move and feel good about it. And because of this super big thing, combined with all that other little stuff, this is one of the greatest glow-ups since Mega Mawile evolved and became an Uber in Gen 6. Hisuian Samurott is simply the infinitely better version without a shadow of a doubt. And Samurott fans are finally eating. So, I feel saying Greninja is the number one is potentially incredibly controversial, especially given that I am putting it above Hisuian Samurott, who is arguably better in the current metagame. This is of course an incredibly fair point. However, I have my reasons. The first is usually that I look at them in mostly official formats overall to truly see how they have performed and how they aged. And Ash-Greninja was technically part of that kit, so it has that going for it. Ash-Greninja was just kind of insanely busted. Back in the olden days of Proteans being overpowered, it was also an amazing Pokemon. Now, it has neither Ash-Greninja, but instead, some +1s if it KOs a Pokemon that it loses forever if it switches, and a very nerfed Protean. And yet, despite these shortcomings in falling to UU for a little bit in Gen 9 singles, Greninja has still made it work and is still completely viable in the format as one of the single best late game cleaners. Positioning it in the late game and KOing a weakened Pokemon only for Battle Bond to kick in and increase your attacking stats and speed, that's insane. And it can win games on the spot. And honestly, I think that ability to win games on the spot, combined with its past legacy, warrants that it takes the number one spot. And that's it. With that said, now that I got done talking about water, I think I want to go swimming, is what I would say, but it's getting to be winter and it's cold. But I do want to make contact with water. I guess I'll just go wash my hands and go get a drink. But tell me who you guys think is the best water starter in the comment section below.